Hey out there, my name's Jeff DeRiso, and welcome to Newsbud's newest show, Mind Hack, the show that covers stories that explore the hidden workings of the human mind. Today on Mind Hack, AI bots learn to chat in their own language, how objectivity creates a culture of conformity, and a headset that helps you harness the power of the Force. That's all coming up on this edition of Mind Hack. Today we begin by looking at the business section of Wired magazine, where the headline from March 16, 2017 reads, "It begins. Bots are learning to chat in their own language." Now we've heard previously about robots being able to converse with humans, and we've even seen the somewhat creepy video from Hanson Robotics of their creation Sophia, who seems to be able to carry out a quite coherent conversation with her human counterparts. This article talks about a new development in language learning for artificial intelligence. It's about a man named Igor Mordach, who is bringing a new methodology to teaching computers language. And what's interesting about Igor Mordach is that he's not a linguist, but his background is actually in robotics and animation. He's actually even worked for Pixar on Toy Story 3. This new project with Igor Mordach and others is being sponsored by OpenAI, the artificial intelligence lab started by Tesla founder Elon Musk and Y Combinator president Sam Altman. Mordach and his collaborators created a world where bots are charged with completing certain tasks, like moving themselves to a particular landmark. The world allows bots to create their own language as a way of collaborating, helping each other to complete those tasks. So instead of the traditional approach to language learning in AI, which has been more about taking in large amounts of data about human speech and human language and trying to analyze statistical patterns within that and emulate it and mimic human speech. What Mordach is doing is teaching the bots to create their own language for the same reasons that he believes humans created their own language. And this article goes into great detail, and if you want to read the actual study, it's on OpenAI's website. Now, why I find this interesting is that Elon Musk has been particularly public about his caution in artificial intelligence technology. And what concerns me is that this technology may not have an application that would benefit all of humanity. The only benefit that I could think of that could come from robots and artificial intelligence agents talking to each other would be to create a team of robots that are powered by artificial intelligence minds that can do jobs and tasks in the real world faster than human beings can. While that might lower the cost of doing business for entrepreneurs, what does it mean for the people whose jobs are being displaced by these stronger, smarter, faster teams of robots? So that's something to think about, and it's something that the author of this article seemed to miss. There's not any mention of the applications of this technology anywhere in the article. And from what I imagine, this could have military applications, but like most of you out there, I'm not too fond of the idea of living in a world with robot armies policing the streets. The question I want to throw back to you, the audience, is what type of applications could we apply this technology to that could benefit all of humankind? I can't think of anything. So if you can, please comment on this video and let me know your thoughts about this technology and how it could possibly be used to help everyone. Next, let's look at an article by Greg Guma in Global Research from March 9, 2017. It's called Deadly Facts: How So-Called Objectivity Created a Culture of Conformity. The intro of the article states, "About a century ago, the Western world entered an age of artificial substitutes, technical ingenuity, mechanical products, technological values, and accelerating motion. The watchword of the age was objectivity, a highly elusive standard for both leaders and the led. In particular, the notion of objectivity deeply affected the emerging mass communications industry, which before long was serving as one of the most powerful tools of global social management. In creating this standard of objectivity and constantly striving for it, we've created a world where nothing exists except that which can be empirically observed and measured. And Guma's concern is that this limits the role of human consciousness. Where did this schism begin? He says it started with John Locke. No, not that John Locke. This John Locke. John Locke was a 17th century English philosopher and part of the so-called Enlightenment movement. His idea, the tabula rasa, is that the human mind is a blank slate to be imprinted upon by external stimuli. He says, "Let us then suppose the mind to be, as we say, white paper, void of all character, without any ideas. How comes it to be furnished? Whence comes it by that vast store which the busy and boundless fancy of man has painted on it with an almost endless variety?" So with this idea, John Locke is making a major departure from his predecessors, who did believe that there was a sort of innate knowledge that was somehow part of what it meant to be human. But Locke, in creating the tabula rasa idea, reduced the world to only sense perception. Now, Locke's hypothesis influenced many 20th century researchers, including the famous psychologist John Brodus Watson, who was the first to do conditioning experiments on humans in the famous Little Albert experiment, where he was able to condition phobias in a very small infant child. Watson proved that Pavlov's idea of conditioning could be used on humans. And this was the beginning of the psychological school known as behaviorism. At the center of the behaviorism movement is Watson's affirmation that a human being is an assembled organic machine ready to run. Picking up on this, B.F. Skinner continued Watson's work in creating something called operant conditioning, which also introduces the idea of reward and punishment, conditioning humans to behave in a certain way. Now, in Guma's view, there's a huge downside to this. What this does is it gives the leaders and managers of society a special power and a new tool to use to mold the people who they're managing to their will. The unfortunate thing is that for the people who are not the managers and leaders of society, we are reduced to not having any sort of free will whatsoever. So what this has created, in Guma's view, is something called the other-directed person. So the result of creating humans who see themselves and who see others as being directed by external stimuli is the centralization and bureaucratization of society. And what this does is it ensures that social conformity is the primary force of influence. So in this article, we see the downsides of how thinking of the human brain and the human mind as a blank slate to be imprinted upon by external stimuli is really a defeatist mentality for humanity. So you might say, well, what's the alternative? So this article is actually a part of a series of articles called Prisoners of the Real, an Odyssey. And I'll put a link to that as well. This work promotes an alternative idea called Dionysian leadership. Now that word comes from Dionysus, who was the Greek god of grape harvest, winemaking, and wine, of ritual madness, and of fertility. Here's Guma's short description of what Dionysian leadership means. Dionysian leaders use artistic methods to invent structures of reality. Although they acknowledge that scientific and artistic processes have equal worth, they de-emphasize logical reasoning and deduction and focus on metaphorical thinking. Their interest is not definition, but discovery. I think it's really important to not just point out the errors in philosophies and thoughts in the current system, but to offer up an alternative, a new system, a new idea for how things can work in the future. You may be asking, what's an example of how conditioning can create a certain response in an entire human society? And that brings us to this week's edition of Mind Hack Flashback. Today we flash back to October 10th, 1990, where a young 15-year-old girl, known only as Nayyirah, testifies before the Congressional Human Rights Caucus about a recent visit to Kuwait with her mother.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Nayyirah's testimony helped create a national outrage within the United States at the Iraqi soldiers for their inhumane acts. But what the American people weren't told was that Nayyirah was the daughter of a U.S. ambassador to Kuwait. And furthermore, her performance was coordinated by both the White House and a public relations firm known as Hill & Knowlton, which is a subsidiary of a larger public relations firm called WPP. Of course, this testimony was reported as fact by all the mainstream fake news organizations, and it eventually led to the U.S. invasion of Iraq in the First Gulf War. WPP and Hill & Knowlton were hired by Citizens for a Free Kuwait and received nearly $10.8 million to conduct one of the most effective public relations campaigns in history. Since then, the truth about Nayyirah's testimony has come out, but not in time to stop the First Gulf War. This is one of the most historically significant examples of how fake news led the United States to war. And that's today's Mind Hack Flashback. Recently featured at South by Southwest is an amazing new piece of technology that is the subject of the next article. Mind-controlled devices are giving power back to those with physical disabilities. Already, we can begin to see a contrast with the first article, which was also about a new piece of technology. But in this article, even in the title, the author gives us a hint at one of the possible applications. The technology comes from a company called Emotive, whose CEO, Tan Le, is a Star Wars fan who spoke of this technology as letting our brains harness the power of the Force. She did a recent session at South by Southwest where she strapped her creation onto an audience member's head, and this audience member was actually able to use his own mind to move a ball which was connected via Bluetooth. This technology works with something called wireless electroencephalogram, or EEG. An EEG is a test that tracks brainwave patterns to find problems related to the human brain. So what the article goes on to tell us is that once the EEG captures this data, that it can be used in two related ways. One, it can use signals measured by the brain as commands to control electronic devices, like we see in the South by Southwest demonstration. Or it can monitor brain signals to collect data on how brains behave, which can then be analyzed and used to improve brain function. The idea of using the human brain to control external objects is extremely exciting and empowering for human beings. This technology was even used on a recent ESPN show called Sports Science, where scientists were able to track athletes' performance and give them insights that allowed them to improve that performance. Other applications include flying a drone, casting a magic spell in video games, or moving around a toy. But the truly special application for this technology was alluded to in the title, and that is to help people with disabilities. Not only people with physical disabilities, but also with mental disabilities. With an EEG, neurologists can find patterns and spot abnormalities that could lead to seizures or other neurological disorders. Just as you can use the brain to control and move a toy, you can also empower people with physical disabilities, Lay said. Those who have lost limbs can open or close doors or turn on faucets by communicating with their thoughts. This is something that gives me hope. Take, for example, the story of the 18-year-old Cora Lovio, who in 2000 got in a horrible car accident that left her in a semi-vegetative state. Tan Le created a Kickstarter campaign to fund an early version of this EEG helmet for Cora. the campaign raised more than $1.6 million. In this video, you can see Cora controlling a video game with her mind for the very first time.
The rock doesn't move the first time you try, okay? Begin your mental lift. Now, think about lifting rock just like he did. You did it. Yeah.
Though this technology does inspire optimism, there are still some major obstacles to overcome. For one, hair. Hair seems to interfere with the function of the helmet. Also, other electronic devices that are in the room. And others have pointed out that the headset could be picking up on muscle contraction rather than actual brain activity. But despite these challenges, I think this is a worthwhile technology that has a clear and concrete application that is really necessary for society. And unlike the first article we talked about today, where it was unclear what the possible applications were, this was very clear. I'm really hopeful that Tan Lei represents a new breed of entrepreneurs and hopefully venture capitalists also who are concerned with technological applications that are benevolent and not just about profit motive. I'm sure all of us know at least one person who is disabled and could really use the empowerment that a device like this could provide for them. And that's what makes me excited about new developments in technology. And hopefully someday, myself or maybe my children will be able to harness the power of the Force. That's it for today's edition of Mind Hack. Thanks for watching. I'm Jeff DeRiso, and I'll see you next time.
For just a small subscription fee, you can become a member of the Newsbud community and help keep this website running. Your subscription will provide you with full community access to exclusive content, including videos and articles from Newsbud's team of experts and analysts, as well as a members-only monthly newsletter from Newsbud's founder, Sibel Edmonds. Sign up today for full access at newsbud.com.